Cruz here with The Real Masculine, and I have another one of my really good friends, a former coach, Lazaros from Social Prime, and he's also the founder of Project Lazaros. How you doing, man?
I'm really good, and thank you for having me here. I actually feel very excited. I'm also a bit tired because I had a long day today, building the website and preparing some other content. So yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm really good. I look forward for getting into it.
Nice, man. I'm excited to have you on. So today's topic that I wanted to, talk about with you is limiting beliefs. And I think for a lot of guys that are watching this, whether their awareness level is, maybe lower, they're beginners, or they may be, more advanced or have been doing personal development for a while, to some degree or another, they might have some awareness around beliefs or limiting beliefs that might be stopping them from really achieving the goals they want with dating, with purpose, with money. But I wanted to, ask you, what do you see, what are limiting beliefs to you, and what do you think the source of them is?
Well, for me, the limiting beliefs have been going back a long way since I really came across this as a concept when I was probably in my second year of practicing cold approach. So it was like probably 7 to 8 years before. And I started coming across the concept of beliefs in general. I started coming across this, generally the concept of subconscious subjective reality. So I started realizing that we had some sort of filters for the world around us, and I started realizing it specifically with people and in social circumstances, and that those filters are kind of shaped by our past experiences. So that's the first thing I came across initially. But right now, after all these years of working with blockages, I believe the source of limiting beliefs is the perception of self connected with some experience of inadequacy in early years of life. So 3, 4 years old, when we start shaping our identity, we get for the first time introduced to a version of ourselves that is not good enough, like this perception of ourselves being not good enough. And basically, all the limiting beliefs that we come across later on are basically built on top of that initial root perception. So later on in different areas of our life, we come across new skills, new hobbies, new activities, and then it's possible that we bring together this part of us that is not good enough, this part of our perception that perceive ourselves as not good enough, and that takes different forms and creates those limiting beliefs. So in school, you can say, I'm not good at homework, and I'm not good at math, and you create this reality that you're not good at math. Now, for me, the most interesting right now about the limiting beliefs is how they take over a little bit of the brain faculties, like of our logic and our mind, and they kind of like try to bring balance in order to create this reality from the belief. And that's the most tricky part of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, in other words, the experiences from our early youth shape how we believe the world is in relation to us, and our inner world believing it's a certain way will then cut out the parts of reality that don't align with our inner world and kind of shape it to match with how we feel inside about ourselves.
Yeah.
In relation to it.
Exactly. That's the most tricky part, because our perception of reality is what we perceive as real. It's everything we see, and questioning it, like breaking the limiting beliefs and working the limiting beliefs, it, no matter what tool and what method and what direction we use, it always has to go through questioning. So it always has to go through questioning what seems to be. And what seems to be is all we have, and that's the biggest issue. So it's all about learning to step out of what we see, and basically step in the dark. Like, it requires a willingness to step in the dark, the area that has uncertainty. Uncertainty is a very essential part of it. So I can get in, like, I think we'll get in more specific practices later on in the call. But if I have to answer in a more general way, what I would perceive as the main principle behind guys working their limiting beliefs would be learning to question and learning to step in the uncertainty, like learning to be willing to step in the uncertainty.
Yeah, that's great. I think one thing that I noticed that has worked for me a lot and works for a lot of guys that I work with is basically guiding them and holding their hand and to be able to step into that what you call the uncertainty, almost stepping into the pain and letting them experience and be with that part of them that feels this way or sees the world this way. And you're right, questioning it allows them to almost unravel the inner emotional logic that we put onto it that holds it together, that makes it so firm. And for a lot of you guys that are listening to this that might believe, I'm lost, I'm broken, I'm not, there's no one and nothing can save me. This in itself is just you being really so enmeshed in your limiting belief that anything outside of that doesn't seem possible. This is what the uncertainty that Lazaros is talking about is if you're so much stuck inside of it, then any possibility outside of that world will actually feel and seem impossible to you. And that'll be the reality that you create for yourself until you start to question it.
Yeah, and also generally the beliefs and this filter of reality that I called before, this subjective perception that I called before, is a mechanism, like our whole identity, creating an identity for ourselves, saying that I'm Lazaros and what I like is XYZ type of food, and XYZ type of girl, and like all those generally the beliefs, not only the limiting ones, but even like every belief, they're supposed to work as shortcuts, so we don't spend every time the same amount of energy figuring out stuff. And they're literally a tool for our being, developing this thing called personality. It is basically a collection of an insane amount of beliefs, and they're a tool, they're a shortcut, filtering out stuff that are not necessary in the moment. The value system itself can be perceived as a set of beliefs. The issue with that system, like with that collection of shortcuts, is that it it can be very, very sticky. It can be very, very stubborn. Like the thing that you say that you want, it wants to stay like this. It doesn't want to allow new beliefs to be created that are contradicting with it, because that would, like, it kind of creates a mind of its own after a certain point, and it's using your faculties to kind of protect itself, and it's what we call the ego. So basically what I'm saying is that the whole thing tries to stay as it is at every given moment. It is like a survival mechanism of your personality, and we see that more in older people. So as a kid, you have no set of beliefs yet, and then you start developing them, and then after a certain point, every new belief would contradict with an already existing one, and that's the issue usually. And many people believe that after a certain age, you cannot learn anymore. You cannot change your beliefs. You cannot change the way you see the world. It is because they become so firm after a certain point, and because they become so, like, as I call them, sticky and stubborn, that it's really hard for you to just bring in another one. You have to really be able to detach from the existing ones first. So of course that's necessary for limiting beliefs, the beliefs that are actually bring on kind of self-destructive behaviors or stagnation in your life in any area, like procrastination, for example, or like, I don't know, issues in dating with fears of moving forward in situations, fears of committing in other situations. so with girls, for example. But generally, I believe it's crucial to learn to detach from any given belief, not only the limiting beliefs, because even the ones that are kind of helpful, they can be upgraded and updated all the time. So the more we actually do that type of work that allows us to detach and become flexible of our beliefs, like become less attached to them, and always be with an open mind to drop something and adopt um, adopt something new when it comes to the way we see things. Realizing that it's also essential to realize that our reality is subjective, our perception is subjective, is not the one and real absolute truth. Gives us this ability which we have. Now, many people confuse that, and they try to go to the other extreme. They try to reach a place that they don't have any beliefs, that they don't have any ego, that they don't have anything as a perception of reality, and they are just always figuring things out again and again and again. And that is possible, but it requires a certain maturity of the inner mechanics. So it requires to go through breaking and rebuilding, and breaking and rebuilding. What I called before updating and upgrading. This has to come again and again and again. It goes in cycles as we develop. And it is possible at some point you reach a state in which you feel more connected and you have a different type of intelligence. Some people can call it enlightenment, some people can call it presence, some people can call it in different ways. But it's not a digital thing, it's not a linear thing. It's just a higher form of intelligence, let's say. So, but you cannot jump right away there. So you need to go through different sets of beliefs. And going through that development of beliefs, some of them are really, really limiting. And those are usually have a source traumatic experience or a shocking experience from the past, as we said before. But some of them are just not as effective. In any case, breaking and building again and again and again is part of the game. And I think that's something that we all have to kind of get used to as an idea.
Absolutely, man. Tell me, one thing we talked about is we kind of slightly covered it, but I want to go into it more is the power of awareness. How does awareness help you, be able to look at your different limiting beliefs, and how does it actually help you start to break them down and create that separation?
Well, to speak about that, we have to first define awareness. So there is a confusion for many as with awareness and understanding, and logical understanding. So awareness includes logical understanding, but awareness includes many more things. Becoming aware is becoming conscious of, and there are a bunch of things that are happening around us and we're not conscious of them. So becoming aware is just, if you have a flashlight, if your consciousness is like a flashlight or a camera lens, you're just pointing it to a certain thing, and that's when you look at it, you become aware of it, and that's all it is. But all of those things have different layers of depth. So let's say I notice a certain reaction to a certain situation. I notice that I'm with people, I'm around people, and I feel kind of judged, and I feel also defensive. And when somebody says something about me, I notice a tendency to take it personally and feel offended. And then I notice that I start perceiving people as kind of in a more hostile way, like they don't like me, like they're on the other side. So this is just, becoming aware of it. So I just become aware of a behavior. I just become aware of a pattern. It's recurring. I see this again and again every time I deal with people. But then this awareness has depth. My ability to become conscious of that has depth. So I can observe it. And then in the beginning, I will just see a behavior. But then later on, I will start seeing the intention behind why I become defensive. I will see why I become defensive. I become defensive because this type of thing triggers me. And then why does it trigger me? Like I just dive deeper into it, and it's experiential. I just observe uh, either in the moment or in the memory of this reaction. I just observe the experience that I feel, and so part of it is the reaction of my body. Part of it is the texture of my thoughts. How does my thought tend to behave? Is it coming from a place of wanting to prove something to this person? Coming from a place of wanting to hide something because I'm afraid to be vulnerable and this person might hurt me? So I start realizing that there is a difference in the place that it could come from. Then you dive deeper and deeper. You become aware of the other situations that you feel the same. You become aware of the subtle differences between those situations. You start becoming aware of older experiences, like experiences from your past. You felt similar. You go deeper and deeper. You start becoming aware of the first period that you start feeling this way. You start becoming aware of a perception that this brings, kind of like the world it changes. Like you start becoming aware of, I am getting into this reaction, but it also brings together a whole emotional state. And from this emotional state, the world seems different. I perceive myself different. So this is more subtle. This is not anymore just a reaction, a behavior. It starts becoming awareness of an emotion, the feelings. It starts becoming awareness of the perception for the world. It starts becoming awareness of the body sensation. So it's all together. And when you perceive this whole thing from that perspective, it becomes kind of the object of your consciousness. It's not anymore an absolute part of reality, but it starts becoming a little object. It starts becoming a little bit of your choice to detach from this object. You start being able to take a step back and see it like you would see an object in your desk, and then you can like remove it and put it somewhere else. So that is how awareness really helps detaching from beliefs, and that is how awareness really helps breaking down beliefs. It's not so much about analyzing and understanding it logically, because every time that we try to do that just logically, using our logic, using just other type of rules to break it down, we don't really dive in it from our whole intelligence. So our intelligence is beyond logic. I don't know if that makes sense for the guys watching, but basically what I'm saying is that when you hear somebody saying logically, what it basically means is that you have a set of rules in your current personality that you believe in, and those sort of rules can say that, okay, now people supposed to be like polite with each other, and people supposed to hide their feelings because expressing your feelings might be rude. People supposed to have one sex partner, and having another sex partner is cheating. So this is a belief. This thing is a belief that we see also the mainstream having. Now, taking this belief and taking another belief that says that like diving in something uncomfortable, it's wrong, because it can make you it can make you sad, and the whole point of life is being happy and not being sad. So whenever you feel something uncomfortable, you should strive away and go and look away from it. So taking this belief with the partner and taking the other belief with something uncomfortable, bringing them together, you start having a logic around your relationship and building a third belief that says that in my relationship, whenever my partner makes me feel uncomfortable, I should kind of cover it up and change subject, or go do something else that it will not bring those uncomfortable emotions up. And this ends up suppressing a lot of stuff, as we know if we look deeper inside psychology. But for the average man or woman, this is kind of normal reality. And when they logically think about it, this seems very like normal. It seems very logic, because the mind tries to prove it with the set of beliefs they're having.
Yeah.
But using our whole intelligence, it means to experience where this leads. Where does this lead? Where does this type of dynamic lead? If you try to experience with your whole intelligence, it means that every time they just start, like they come across this phenomenon, and then the one goes and plays a video game, or goes and does something different. They try to avoid their comfortable feeling. Their body starts reacting. They have a tension in the chest maybe, or in the stomach. So this is another part of your intelligence, your body. The body sensations give you signals, tells you stuff, and they're not connected with the logic, with the logical beliefs. So what I'm saying basically is that awareness is about an experience, and the experience uses our whole system. And the current set of beliefs that we're having, they're just a part of it. They are just like a little linear part of it. That our emotions, our body, they make non-linear calculations, and a very, very important part of it that we often neglect.
Mm-hmm.
So awareness for me is crucial, and awareness also, like after we make this definition, I have to say that awareness requires to, again, as I said in the beginning, to always be the examiner, always be the one who is ready to question the current set of, I don't know, like the current seem like reality.
Like the rules, yeah.
The rules, the thing that it seems to be real, and step inside the unknown, step inside the uncertainty. So awareness, the game of awareness is doing that, being someone who comes from willingness to examine, willingness to question, and always explore.
Yeah. I look at awareness as like the key that takes you to all these different locks and helps you like unlock it so that you can actually open the door and look underneath it. It's like the key that guides you to all these places that we repress or suppress, that they're kind of our unconscious patterns. So by consciously taking, okay, yeah, I noticed that when I'm in front of these people, I feel judged, or I feel like I'm less than them, and then I feel like I have to prove myself to them. That's your awareness starting to examine what's actually happening underneath the behavior itself. And by going backwards and following the line all the way back, you can actually start to experience fully the rule behind the behavior. And that's what actually allows you to start to unravel it and start to break it apart, to where then you can make a new decision. Like, is this now serving me, or can I let that go? I use a similar process, and what we'll dive into next is like some of the processes you use with your clients. But one of the processes I use is basically an emotional releasing process that helps them with their awareness understand where their intention is coming from the behavior or the feeling. And what I found is, maybe I'd love to hear from your perspective what you think it is, but I found it usually comes from 5 areas that has an attachment and an aversion side to it. So the 5 areas I found is wanting control, or wanting to give up your power, wanting to be controlled, wanting approval or wanting disapproval, wanting safety or security, and then wanting to just give up, or wanting to just, throw in the towel, or wanting to die, kind of this attachment and aversion side. And the last one is wanting oneness or belonging. And the other side of it is wanting separation, or wanting to reject or get away from. And I found it typically lands into like one of these key areas as the core intention behind what it is you're feeling in that moment and what's creating the behavior. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I usually tend to break it into a model of 2. So it's usually either like a separating energy, or an energy of oneness, as you said, an energy of connectedness. And usually the separating energy, it is the one that brings you into perceiving the world as a more hostile place, perceiving yourself as from a separating perspective, like separate from the world. Then it's also what in our current time creates this perception of called like relationships that are about getting and giving, like
Like
they become
conditional
more of a
relationships?
conditional relationships, like communication through it's like every communication becomes kind of a bargain,
Transactional.
transactional, exactly. And and for me, this roots into a whole from, again, I will get it back into the model with the traumas and the childhood. For me, this roots from there in your lifetime, but it is also something that in Buddhist they call like basically in English root, like a seed in humanity that goes from generation to generation, and this seed is inactive but gets activated early on, and that's basically what happens when a kid, like being very sensitive, 3-4 years old, when it creates identity, uh, feels disconnected from a parent, and then this creates a little hole, and that hole stays there and just manifests in different ways in different areas. And in those areas, when the hole gets manifested and gets triggered and activated, the person tends to perceive this like through this energy of separation. So all of the things that I said included. When our natural state and our natural desire is oneness and connection. So when that hole and that trauma is not activated, then we naturally tend to look for that type of energy. We naturally are attracted by love and attracted to love. And we naturally are attracted to want to give unconditionally. But it triggers fear, and that's where I understand the rest of the five that you said. For example, the safety usually comes because those two paradigms of oneness and separation, they are not compatible. So being in one, you cannot perceive the other. You cannot perceive how the other is true. You can only remember it logically, and it requires for you a self-sacrifice and stepping out of that in order to remember your natural desire for oneness and your natural tendency to connect. I don't know if that makes clear sense, but that's why I also said that awareness and breaking beliefs, it requires stepping into the unknown. Also, bringing yourself back into your natural state of loving and like looking for oneness, it requires to step into the unknown, because many people get glimpses of that and then they try to access it through memory, but memory doesn't work in this case. You can only remember to make a step back out into the unknown. So when you feel you are threatened, you have to allow yourself to take a risk, conscious risk. When you feel you're threatened by love, for example, I have an experience that, and a very very pivotal experience, very important experience for me, in which I felt very much in love with a girl, and like this has happened multiple times, and it's always a very intense experience, very I would call it psychedelic experience. And I had the option to basically stay within my boundaries and just don't like. So I will give some more detail. So I feel very much in love with that girl. We have an insane connection, great connection. We meet in Berlin, and she's from Finland. So she she goes back to Finland. And when we were together in Berlin, she was like very warm, and she basically invited me there. And I go to Budapest, and in Budapest, I lose my backpack, and I also lose my flight. I lose my tickets for the flight. So I'm like, whatever. And I really want to see her. So I'm like, whatever, I'm going to get a flight in Finland. But when I tell her that, she kind of freaks out and she blocks herself because she had a very bad experience with a guy in the past stalking her and kind of like, being kind of traumatized by that. But of course, because it wasn't her trauma, it wasn't her separation, perceiving me as an enemy, as I said, as a hostile person. She blocks, she blocked herself, and all of her reactions were like basically hostile. And when this happened, I had the chance to either see it as a hostile and also raise my defensive and say, okay, now I'm going and staying into my territory and not exposing myself, don't become vulnerable to this person, uh, getting my ego defenses up and stay and go back to Greece and just like continue my life and kind of like forget about it. It was one more girl, like perceive it this way. Or I could say, okay, this feels like inspiring to do. I feel inspired to meet this girl. I feel inspired to move forward with this girl. So fuck the ego. And I know that she's into like she's doing that because of her reasons, feeling defensive. I didn't believe that it was because of like really she didn't want it. So I just decided to make it easier for her. So I said okay, because initially she had invited me to her place. So I said okay, I'm gonna just rent in my place, and I'm not gonna come now. I'm gonna come later on, like a couple of weeks later, because I had consciously decided I wanted to see her. So she seems better with that. She calms down. She realized that I can empathize with her, that I don't take it personally. And a couple of days later, I booked the ticket. And when I tell her that, okay, I will book the tickets now, she she doesn't answer. And then when I do book the ticket, like she freaks out, even though I would stay in my own place and I was like completely chill with even not meeting her. So I just stopped having contact with her, and then I have booked my trip, so I go there anyways. But she doesn't really contact me, even though she knew the date that I was about to go there. And this felt really, really intense for me. Really, like kind of like, like it was hurting me, or I was like hanging from a thin thread. My
Mm-hmm.
ego was really on the line, but I go and I consciously put myself there anyway, and I try to stay away from the mentality of, okay, block her completely from your mind, and I stay away from the mentality, okay, let's fall and feel depressed about it. So I don't follow the one side or the other side of escaping, of avoidance, which is usually the case, and I just decided to perceive it as an experience of, staying inside that pain and let it lead me where it can lead me. And the first day, so I'm about to go there and to stay in Helsinki for 5 days. And the first day I'm there, I decide I'm gonna chill a little bit there. I meet with an old student from Finland, and later on I'm gonna like shoot her a message the next day, and whatever happens, happens. And in that day that I've been through this type of like pain and fear and kind of, this type of energy that I feel uh, hurt, and I feel my ego on the line and all that kind of stuff. I have this moment of meditating in the morning. Like it's the next day, but in the morning I'm alone in my Airbnb and I meditate after like a long sauna. And it, everything breaks. Like for this moment, after days of just pain and feeling kind of this temptation to just run away, just escape it, avoid it, and all that kind of stuff, and just feeling this type of hole that I described in my chest. In that moment, it just feels like I completely let go of this. I completely forget about this. And then it starts going deeper and deeper and deeper, and everything kind of seems that everything breaks. And it's one of the most intense, like I can call it ego death experience that I have ever had. I can remember it there. I'm in the sofa of my room in the Airbnb. I have closed my eyes, and I feel like the whole world is coming towards me, and I become kind of part of it, and then we kind of goes uh, big, like high speed, and kind of like takes different shapes and becomes extremely big, extremely creepily big, and extremely creepily small. um, in infinite speed, and I feel I am that. I have completely get out of my body. I don't remember my body. Everything literally breaks. It was a very intense experience, from which I cry. I would like I wake up out of it like laughing, crying, feeling kind of ecstatic. Didn't remember exactly how much time I was there. Very intense, and the whole pain, the whole thing was gone, and I felt light. And I felt like, because the days before I felt like sending her or putting or like trying to communicate with her would be perceived from this hostile mentality, and I didn't want to do that. I also felt resistance of doing that. I also felt afraid that if I do that, I put myself even more uh, into that situation. But I had decided I'm going to do that anyway. And the moment that I decided I'm going to do that anyway, somehow happened that like a little bit before I had this insane breakthrough experience. And then when I do that, when I just, communicate with this girl, it comes from a completely different place. Like at this moment, like it comes from completely like feeling okay, feeling love for her, feeling that there is like nothing wrong with her reaction. I completely understand her reaction. Um, I empathize fully. That there is not a single amount of resistance to make it easier for her. Like I feel making it easier for her is obvious. Obviously, I will make it easier for her. Obviously, I will give her the option for her to come to my place in case she feels uncomfortable for me going to her place, since she had that experience in the past. Anyways, many details. We spent 3 amazing days together. I have very profound experiences with her there. Eventually, like I lived Finland, of course, I was just there for a few days, and for that experience, basically, I didn't even expect that it would happen. And coming back, I feel this insane amount of energy for a long time, very much grounded on my purpose. Things are flowing, connecting very easily, huge amounts of inspiration for my work with my students. Like so many good stuff coming out of it. And my point out of this is that, for me, this, and I probably dragged it a lot, but I want to share this story. For me, this type of two different energies and stepping out of the energy that creates this separation from the world, the energy that creates these ideas of trying to defend yourself to have safety. The energy that is like, sometimes it makes you think that you should show your boundaries in aggressive ways. The energy that makes you feel that you should hurt somebody who hurted you. This type of energy for me is very characteristic, and it brings me back into that story, and it brings me back into the realization that I come again and again and again from different stories, that it's all about willingness and the conscious decision in all the little moments that you have to decide to sacrifice that which you perceive as self. That which you perceive as self has to, and that is which you perceive as self that you try to protect. This is the set of beliefs, and the idea that you have to protect that, and that you have to hold it like as it is, you have to keep it as it is. This is the set of the limiting beliefs usually. It is an energy behind that manifests as different identities and beliefs, as different ideas. Which one idea could be that I shouldn't invest to a girl, I shouldn't express my huge desire through investing actions to this girl because that would make her not interested. This is an idea a lot of guys have. They think that if they show that they are not interested, that's the only case in which the girls will chase them, and that's the only case in which girls will be attracted to them, and that's definitely not the case. From the other paradigm, you can attract crazy, you can have way more crazy amounts of attraction, way more powerful attraction. So you see, this belief is just a manifestation of that energy, that and separating energy, that separating reality. And it manifests in a bunch of different ones, but this is for me a very usual example, and it matches with the story because that was the limiting belief that I was killing in this story. The limiting belief that, okay, this person, by me wanting to go towards her and go after her, she would not only be disinterested, but also be block me out and like also perceive me as this type of guy who is needy and all that kind of stuff, which was definitely not the case. And for this specific person, I also inside the days we spent together, the experience was very meaningful for her as well because me doing that type of sacrifice allows her to feel the trust and allows her to see past the defenses and allows her to also open up way more than she had opened up for years. And I still have very fond idea for her. Like I still feel really good stuff about this person, even though like we didn't, you know, you didn't meet again. We didn't keep contacting as often as I would expect after this intense experience. We're still in contact, but this emotional thing between us is not there anymore. We're not like connected in the same way. But because we shared something like this, it really feels like we stay connected. While from the other energy, from the energy of separation, from the energy of the world, the hostile place, and the people, and we have to keep ourselves safe. Usually, we tend to break up with people and kind of block them out of our life and try to have this like kind of
like a wall,
and like you know, a lot of people perceive it as like they keep their life organized like this. But the biggest paradox is like you never break up with a friend that you feel comfortable with. You never break up with a friend that you feel like yourself when you in his presence, and you usually can stay separated for a long period of time, and then you always just cuts up, and nobody like takes it personally that the other side didn't send or didn't try to connect. And in other types of relationships, this is the case. Many people have it with their friendships, but way more people have it in their dating relationships. The idea that, okay, we only have one person's attention, and if that person doesn't pay attention, then that means something bad about us. That now we have to protect ourselves and close ourselves, like put that wall, block the other person out. And then all of those are tendencies usually coming out and being rooted in that type of hole, that type of energy that I described. Yeah, basically, I believe sacrificing this that we perceive as self is the key to that.
Yeah, that's I think what you're really saying is like, especially for guys taking on the role of the leader of the relationship, the one that leads by example is being vulnerable, is opening up and letting a part of you that you perceive is who you are almost die a little bit. You're letting it, you're self-sacrificing, you're letting it die, and you're opening up yourself with the potential risk that she might still reject you, that she might still not be okay with it. But that is the irony of it, is that opening, that self-sacrifice is what gives you the highest probability of actually making a meaningful connection and leading it to a desired outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
What are I'd love to move into like maybe like one way that you are working with your students to help them break through their limiting beliefs. Like, what's one of the ways that you help your students with that?
Well, first of all, in my program, I have a lot of we practice a lot of introspection, especially in the early stages. So the way I structure things and the way I work is by combining therapy with conditioning and like intense experiences. So The conditioning for me in the program is teaching certain practices. Some of those practices I teach they have as a goal um, making like conditioning somebody's way of thinking to be introspective. And this is like what we're doing with the journal, and we did it also in your immersion to a big extent. But conditioning somebody's mind to be introspective brings him always into the observer mode, okay? Or the thing that we said before, like the approaching things in a with a questioning mind, approaching things with the willingness to explore. But the most important is that it really enables your like dynamic intelligence or multi-layer intelligence. And what I mean by that is that, let's say we have a certain set of behaviors, certain set of beliefs, a certain set of reactions in situations. And some people can think of that as a programming. Everything can be, if that's what we are, then everything can be kind of predicted. We go throughout days, certain patterns get triggered, and it's always the same again, again, again. The reason why we are different is that we have the ability to take perspective of that and kind of have a second layer. Usually those patterns also transition in the second layer, but we can go even more and we can observe that. For example, let's say I feel afraid, and this has happened to me many times, it happened to my students many times, afraid of something. Let's say I feel fear about something, or I feel limited about something. And then I notice that fear, I notice that limiting belief in our case. And then on top of that, that kind of transitions in my observation. So I'm afraid of people judging me in a group of people, but then I observe that and I'm saying, oh, this is a fear, this is a limiting belief that I always have to be perfect in front of people, otherwise they would judge me. Now, in the second layer, here is my awareness now, here is my observation, I start having, it's possible that I start having the same limiting belief manifested, including that observation. So now I can be afraid that, since I have this fear, I'm not going to perform well in front of the other people because that fear makes me even more tense. And that can get me into, so then I can notice that, and then I can go in a third layer. But at some point, the ability to go into layers of observing the already existing process gives me chances and opportunities to break through. And that's what I teach to a big extent, especially in the initial phase of my programs. I teach that ability. And that ability for me is crucial. That ability for me is what makes our intelligence kind of unlimited, because we can always kind of take perspective of things and update mechanisms, update programming, update patterns. So for me, that's the foundation. Now, after we go through this foundation, I help them basically get inside intense experiences, and we use certain meditations for that, and still stay try as a challenge to stay self-aware in those experiences. So let's say I put somebody in a date, and because the programs have a lot of dating in the theme, so we do cold approach, like basically calls in which I guide them approaching strangers, approaching girls. But also we do, they would go into an experience. Maybe I will give them an assignment to go into that experience, for example, in a certain date. And then in that date, they might feel anxious. But the whole challenge, the whole assignment is to stay conscious and try to observe themselves and the reaction of both of their body and their mind inside that anxiety. And I teach them to go closer and closer in those kind of quote unquote negative states or uncomfortable states, and perceive them as a compass. And what like a mentality that you can understand it with is that pain is just a compass for the wound. Our pain shows us a wound, and just by looking at pain, we can see where the blood is coming from. We can see where our body is weak, where we got wounded. And the same happens in our personality, in our psychology.
Uh-huh.
When you feel anxiety in a certain situation, then you have a trigger and you can follow it deep down the rabbit hole. But what most people do is that in those occasions they get into fight or flight, and they're not really aware. They just like go into pretty much automatic
Reactivity.
reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. Or reactivity, or just like try to get themselves out of there and self-sabotage. And this can be in dating. I teach it in dating because I learned it in dating, and that's my field. That's the field I learned to play with all those concepts, and I find it an amazing field. But I believe the same exact concepts apply everywhere. That somebody can feel anxious, somebody can feel his fight or flight getting triggered. So after I have teach them how to introspect to a certain extent and take perspective, I start moving them into experiences that will trigger them emotionally. Start becoming aware of that, diving inside that willingly, and this goes on and on and on, and you can take a lot of practice because you can imagine a moment that you get triggered as like a curve, and then you have the peak of the curve that you like really triggered. But then as you move closer and closer to that peak, it's harder to be aware.
Uh-huh.
So it is like a muscle. Now later on in the program, when we go more advanced and when we go through the time travel, which is basically a therapy in which I guide them to the initial memories, like 3 4 years old, and then we release from there, and then we step inside self-love together, which is basically the most pivotal moment, I would say, of my coaching. After that point, and that's where therapy gets incorporated with the practices I said before. So after that point, I start teaching them how to introspect through connections with others. So when we have deal with the bulk of the blockage, then we step in understanding mirroring as a phenomenon. And that's the really interesting part. Because then empathy and observing and perceiving others starts becoming uh, a two-way development, like a two-way awareness opportunity. Because you can be aware of the other person's emotions by looking inside you, but you can always be aware of your self looking inside the feelings of another person you're communicating with.
Uh-huh.
Uh, then it goes more and more subtle. Like so, then I start incorporating that part. I start incorporating how the connections can be used to trigger certain things. How the connections can be used also to not only to trigger anxiety, which will go through heavily in the initial part of the program, but then how to trigger other things, more subtle, uh, more quote unquote positive. We start seeing concepts like connection. We start seeing concepts like chemistry. The thing that I called before energetic attraction, because attraction is a little bit confused. So people perceive attraction from the ego perspective, that separating energy, but there is another type of attraction. So we start stepping inside those concepts there, and this snowballs in general. And that's how I go about it with the students. Now, recently I added something called Darkroom Retreats, so self-made darkroom retreats. Well, I do them in 1 month usually from my program. My program is 2 months, and I prepare my students throughout the whole first month for that retreat. And that retreat they do it at home, so they have just they just stay inside the dark room, 24 hours, block windows, block no light at all, and they also do a 1 day water fast there. It's not really hard to do a water fast. It's mostly the whole experience is mostly for the introspection, because this kind of becomes an introspective marathon. So this is an intense experience. It's not something that you'd want to do every week or every like uh, month necessarily, but it's something when you do it at least once. For example, in my experience, when I did it first time, it was very intense and very eye-opening experience. And well, from what in one side, it is a dopamine detox, and it really unplugs you from a lot of stuff. But the real value of this for my program and my purpose is that they have to, the only option is to go inside and to dive deep in their mind. And I pick it strategically to do it right after the time travel, after we have work together and guide them inside the initial traumatic experiences, the ones that create this self-doubt and inadequacy type of paradigm. And then they are ready usually to go into that experience, of course, with my supervision. And then there is that they can really go on the other side when it comes to breaking patterns and like limiting beliefs and all those, type of little self-destructing, self-sabotaging things that they usually they don't see, they haven't seen before. And with the background of the time travel and all the introspective work, that kind of comes on top and really becomes like skyrockets the whole process. It's like a few days. For me, after my darkroom, the first darkroom retreat, I had the effects for weeks after, like for almost a month, that I could see how it affected my whole perception, my whole development, my whole tendency to look inside. I felt insane amounts of, I felt very grounded to my purpose. The second day, it was 48 hours for me. And the second day, it was really hard. Like I felt like it would never end. I had also a lot of emotional releases later on in that day. And the whole theme of the experience was mostly visiting and reliving self-blame due to work and not fulfilling my potential in life when it comes to work, as I had expectations growing up that I have to do I have to become an engineer, and I have to do well and build a good resume, and then I have to work in a corporate business, and then I have to maybe work in this type of environment, try to build a career there with high salary and all that kind of stuff and safety. So having that in my background, I had a subtle blame for myself for kind of dropping out of this whole thing. And I couldn't see that, like it wasn't visible, but it was still affecting. I thought I had let go, but it was still affecting my job now, and it was still affecting my being tuned on my purpose. And appeared there inside my dark room, throw me back in a bunch of different memories from school, where I felt I'm kind of blaming myself for not doing my homework, hating my homework, doing it last moment, then blaming myself for being lazy, feeling kind of like that this brings me into fights with my parents, like a bunch of stuff connected with my perception of my purpose in life, coming from really early days of elementary school, and even like end of maybe, I don't know, kindergarten, but most of the memories were from there, elementary school. So this happened in the second day, and I felt right after it, like it was very emotional. It probably stayed for some hours. Like I lost sense of time there because of the 2 days of darkness. And after I went out of it, it seemed like everything I'm doing, like I've wasted. Like it felt like in the beginning, I felt like I wasted a lot of time, and it felt really, really sad that I was basically, crying because I wasted so much time. But after I went out of it, I still perceive that okay, a lot of things are waste of time. A lot of things are not really important. They're silly things that like they seem not worth effort thinking about them or doubting myself because of them. But I didn't feel sad about it. I felt this very practical, just like let it go. Let's focus on the goal and the purpose. And again, this was an experience that really connects to the purpose, and that's what it does to a lot of people.
So you almost went from a state of like grief, and you went up all the way until acceptance. You went
exactly in some hours, yeah. And then for weeks after, really grounded to my purpose. Like any blockage that I would perceive in my productivity was gone. I could just stay and work all day, loving it. And also any self-doubt for my path in life as a coach, as a mentor, and then like in this type of career, if you want to call it, it was gone. Like I was, and when those things are gone, like when blockages are gone, either if it is in your purpose as a professional, whether in your professional life or if it is in your personal life, um, you start being able to perceive more subtle, like the thing that I called before, more subtle emotions, but way more powerful.
Uh-huh.
So purpose, uh, gratitude, love, um, you know,
Acceptance, courage,
acceptance,
peace.
also feeling connection with others, feeling their emotions, this like empathy, real empathy, and those things start becoming available after you kind of clear out the blurriness of those blockages, of
Mm-hmm.
those in our context of the limiting beliefs, for example.
Yeah.
So when those go out, then you start seeing so much vivid, like so much meaning in things, and you feel so much meaning in things, and this snowballs as well. So that has been probably, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago, and I feel the effects until today. It's like it was really an upward spiral after this. I mean, it was already an upward spiral, the whole progress, but after this, it was really, it kind of like felt like it was skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah.
Nice, man. Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about. I have a, I have a, I would say a very parallel method that you described, that I teach my guys, and it takes them through that same process of different layers of subtlety, and as they dissolve that limiting belief, they go into more subtle experiences of those higher, lighter emotional experiences where um, you're experiencing everything at a much more subtle level, and as you go up, the power of those is exponential. Your growth becomes exponential. It doesn't become small gains, it becomes massive gains because you're
Mhm.
now stepping into more power. What I find is like the lower emotions, they're not bad, they're more limiting though. And you hold on to them, you're creating more limitations. And the higher up you go, there's less limitation and less limitation and less limitation, and it's exponential that you have more possibility, more openness, more freedom. So as you let go of limitation, you exponentially expand in the openness, possibility, and freedom instead. And that's what I think, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
So as we wrap up here, tell us about your new project, Project Lazaros. This, I think, a lot of the stuff you talked about getting really clear on may have been leading to this new foundation of what you just started. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that for the guys that are listening to this.
So, yeah. So I will start with a little bit of background. So back in 2017, we started coaching with Social Prime, and we were running those 15 days immersions, like the one you got at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And well, when we started, we didn't have experience either in business or in running those types of programs. Like we had a little bit experience in coaching, and then those types of programs, like we were very passionate about it, and we developed them round by round. We did a lot of work, research. We built concepts. We built our coaching methodology, and they had they had very intense results, very big results. But one limitation of them was that they had to be in person, and they had to be like people had to take 15 days off and then come and visit us in a country, and we had to like always travel. So we had been traveling for basically 2.5 years non-stop, and even though the experience was very intense, and even though especially the second year that our coaching was developing up, we were doing the big part of the things that I talked about today, as throughout those 15 days. We had also a lot of relapses. So people would relapse, going back home, limiting beliefs, patterns, blockages. As I said, they're quite sticky. They have a tendency to, like they are stubborn. They have a tendency to kind of regenerate themselves, maintain themselves. And when we stop the process, we when we stop the process for a long amount of time, we see them rebuilding themselves. And that doesn't mean that we have to always be, alerted about them, but the 15 days were not enough for sure, and we didn't have the structures to keep going after. So I will make the connection. I will connect the dots. Last May, I started the mentorship. Another thing that I wanted to do, and I realized, is that I was like, I believe that the coaching by itself, the most real form of coaching is one-on-one. So no matter how systematic is the approach, for me, the one-on-one had something special in it. And even in the immersions, I always saw myself trying to isolate and have one-on-one coaching with each one of the students. So our type of coaching is very experiential, and your type of coaching as well is very experiential. It has less theory and more experience, more guidance and experience. And it's a very personal thing, guidance and experience. That's why I realized that the ideal is one-on-one. But I also, for the reason I said before, I realized that the ideal is long-term. But for a business like this and for the way it works, I also didn't agree in the long term that psychologists do, or the more formal therapists do. That thing that you go on and on in therapy sessions for years. And I didn't like this model, even though it's so much established. I don't agree with this model. I wanted to have something that is going to not only get somebody on the other side successfully, but also like integrate in his life and his way of thinking and his being those things that we've been using out of, like, that we learned throughout our journey, and we've been using in our lives, and we've been practicing in our lives to always stay in self-development. Do not see self-development as just a healing. Do not see self-development as just a boost, but see self-development as a constant, ever-growing journey. And this, for me, required a completely different type of approach. I start seeing a lot of people bringing mentorships out there, but also I could see that this wasn't sustainable, because most of those mentorships, they were either running one-on-one as a transitional phase to later on scale and build bigger programs with more people, or they were running again programs in like short amount of time that they wouldn't have support after, and people would also kind of relapse. And the thing that I wanted to build, it was something that coaches somebody with as much time as needed, like without the time limits, and then give him also the certainty, not only to him, but have a certainty that this person is going to permanently change and stay there. Even if he gets through relapses, he will always have the tools and the support to go through those phases and stay in an upward spiral. And I mean, all of those things, I mean, now I'm explaining them in a brief, but all of those things were very, very important for me, since working with all those people for so long, and in that type of approach that our type of coaching has, basically having personal contact with those people, like a student, like is a very special person for you as a coach. Like, you deeply care about them. And then having many of those people relapsing made me realize what type of a coach I want to be. That I don't want to sell a service that is about building a business, but I wanted to sell a service that is about like really transforming those people. Because after somebody goes through my program, it's not a client, it's not a friend necessarily, it's something else. Usually there are friends as well, but it's something else that I start realizing that it's a new connection for me. It's a student. He's a student. He's a different type of thing. It's like a lot of times it feels like family to a big extent. Like you really care about his progress. It's not only fulfilling for your, like, it's not about being fulfilling for your ego, but diving so deep with that person kind of becomes an extension of you. You really care. And I decided that I want to build something that will have that will be mentorship, that will be one-on-one, that will have no time limit, that will have lifetime support after the program, and that will build men who are not only uh, immersed in a self-development journey and in the process of like constantly improving themselves without this feeling like an effort, but like I enjoy it and you enjoy it and other people in this community enjoy it, and they have become like so much more. They have found so much more meaningful life out of constantly being in this journey.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to create that, and then create also a community from that, like a real mastermind. So Project Lazaros is a mission. Project Lazaros is the process to do that. So I've been testing this process for about a year now, taking only 2 students per month, and carefully developing round by round. So Project Lazaros is this process, which is now a 2-month mentorship with lifetime support. It's probably the first type of mentorship that has lifetime support. And when I say lifetime support, I don't mean just putting them in a group that they just have, you know, access to like big video calls only or webinars, or they just have access to a community and just I put some posts and they can just like send me in the chat. I mean real lifetime support in the sense of if some student has an issue at some point, and then we can have a call, and then if I see that he requires like a couple of sessions in order to get back on feet and get grounded back in his like loving and natural state, then I will take this time and then I will manually help him to go to do that. And later on, I will have the structures to help them to do that, but I will not sell it to them. I will offer it as part of my mentorship. Now, also inside the mentorship, I wanted the service to offer daily contact, because I wanted to make sure, especially in the first period of the service, that all of that my students are really getting it. If I teach to a student my introspective mentor, like the journaling that I told you before, our main introspective tool, and then he learns it in the wrong way, and then for like the first week he applies it in the wrong way, and then I have a call with him after, and then I don't have the contact with him because our scheduled courses are just like 2 per week, then that's an issue in our goal, and that's an issue in transitioning him to where we want to transition. So I didn't want also if the call, if because we work with people and I have a call with him and then we work in something deep, and then we stumble upon a certain blockade and we require more time, I cannot just limit my calls by time. I had to use a completely different criteria. So I built the process to do that. And Project Lazaros is about that process. It is a new thing. I haven't seen it somewhere else yet. But Project Lazaros, but it is tested. And I'm pretty certain that I can pull through. Although, because it requires such a big amount of time, and it's also a big commitment from my side, I have to be very careful with the enrollment. So for now, I will start taking 5 people from 2 that I used to, but for now I will have a 3-step application process in order to make sure that those guys that are coming in the program are really the ones that I can 100% help and get them through a process in which I will be bound to them with lifetime support. Other than that, there is a mission. So Project Lazaros is also about my mission. It's not, of course, something like this and the way, like this type of vision and this type of approach in coaching cannot be sustainable as a long-term scalable business. It's a different business model that most coaches out there have. So my mission is to bring 200 people in the next 3 years through this type of coaching, and transition them into a real mastermind, in a mastermind that they will have their own voice, that they will have their own, that they will have a community of guys exactly like them, that they will have also they will be able to be active there, and that this mastermind will be non-profit, and we will use our funding created together like by the members as a way for us to run events or send the members in third-party coaching. And later on, this will be kind of not like the usual dynamic of a mastermind, that there's like the coach, the authority, and then the others are just like, audience, but more active people, that we have video conference together and we just decide for us as a group, and then we can send the members to different retreats and different experiences using the funding of the group. So it's a big vision in that sense. It's not that much of a money-making project as much as like a vision to create something very solid and to make a change to an amount of people that I believe they, in their turn, they will make a change to different people. So I believe those 200 people that they will transition there, they will also do the same in one, like to a certain extent. So some of them will help the people around them in their family, in their work, in their cycle. But some of them might decide to fall along into a journey of having a voice and helping others and coaching, like we do, and that's also amazing. And that's the idea, that's the motivation behind it. That's why I want to do it. I believe that's my destiny, and I believe that's what I'm like, what I can do for the world, what everything until this moment led me to. It came as a vision to me. I mean, it still comes as a vision to me. Still parts come as a vision to me. I don't really. I mean, I sit down at the full work days on it, but I don't really, just have a full strategy. At this point I have a very detailed plan, but I don't have this type of, logical business strategy behind it. It comes in parts as like, this vision, and it comes with clarity, and it comes with this like type of feeling of certain purpose. So
Intuition.
it's quite an intuitive thing. It's the first time it comes in my life, something like this, but I embrace it. Fortunately, I'm in a place to be able to embrace something as big as this. I am a little bit overwhelmed at times, and I feel a little bit afraid of that its size. But I really believe that it's gonna go well, and I'm very excited to see how it's going to, evolve. Right now, I have I haven't launched it yet publicly. So basically, this call is the first one that I am explaining about it, and that I am presenting it openly. I have the website coming hopefully next week, and I will be open for receiving discovery calls for people to get inside this application process that I mentioned and see if I can help them. And for the next month, I will start my first round of it, like my first official round of it, in which I'm going to start like accepting 5 people. So I will have 5 spots per 2 months, because the project is the rounds are 2 months. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So anyone who might be interested for this project, anyone who might be interested of this type of process and becoming part of that mission, can just send me a PM, and we can maybe schedule a call and see how it goes.
Awesome, man. Sounds very clear. Sounds like you have the vision really set out, and the program sounds pretty amazing. I haven't heard of any offerings that provide that lifetime support. And guys, I've worked with Lazaros as well. He's definitely one of the best coaches out there that I've seen. So really great opportunity to learn from him and grow with him, as he's a really great guy, really solid dude, very loving, very masculine. Lazaros, thank you so much for sharing your ideas here, sharing, having this conversation with me. I think we all learned a lot. I think the guys in the group will love this, the content and the value you've provided. And I'll make sure to tag you in the group, and I'll post it in Social Prime as well for the guys there.
Thank you so much for having me, man. And yeah, again, I really enjoyed the call with you. I really enjoy sharing things with you openly, publicly, or just in person. I believe we are destined to collaborate in many ways, and yeah, I'm really glad.
I feel it too, man. I feel it's just a matter of time. I think I think we're really on the same page with a lot of this stuff. So I'm excited for when that day is. All right, brother.
Thanks so much, man.
Thanks so much,
Take
man.
care. Take care,
You too, brother.
Love.